What's up, YouTube? It's your boy JP's on the keys, and it's too easy. We're right in the video. A lot of you have recommended how did Germany get so strong after losing World War One. I'll tell you a quick answer. The biggest answer: the Treaty of Versailles. Obviously, if you basically telling Germany, hey, Germany, you're solely responsible for World War One, and not only are you going to lose all the land that you conquered during the war, you're going to have to financially compensate all of the countries that you took over. And they said that the amount in 1921 was said to be about 33 billion, even though that's not really, even though there's no possible way to know how much money that Germany really was supposed to pay back in reparations to the Allied side. But I did my inflation, 1921 to 2020, almost a whole century later. Germany would have to pay $477 trillion. That's just adjusting for inflation of the US dollar from 1921 to now. So yeah. And also they were one of the most evil people in human history. Is just a young boy just growing up, not knowing a little bit over 20 years later would be a nightmare for the Jewish population. But let's just watch this.
This resulted in hyperinflation, and the German mark plummeted in value. At its lowest point in late 1923, a little over 4 trillion German marks was equivalent to a single US dollar. In the end, a desperate Germany appealed to the British and Americans for assistance, resulting in the enactment of the Dawes Plan. This plan introduced a new currency based on the gold standard called the Rentenmark, and loaned Germany a massive amount of money to restart its industrial sector. Under the Dawes Plan, the Weimar Republic enjoyed a few years of relative stability and recovery, but in 1929, the Great Depression struck, and funding from the United States evaporated almost overnight. Worse still, Germany's creditors began rushing for repayments, plunging the country straight back into financial ruin. While a series of German chancellors like Franz von Papen and General Kurt von Schleicher were busy...
I didn't know that the U.S. was funding Germany. I never knew that the U.S. actually funded Germany's economic resurgence. I actually didn't know that. So that's a pretty interesting fact, considering what happens probably about 10 years down the road from this event.
Handling the fallout, a new political faction began to emerge: the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or simply the Nazi Party. Founded in 1920, they preyed on middle-class fears of a communist uprising for support, and promoted an extremely antagonistic, anti-Semitic platform that demanded a racially pure Germany. Despite surging in elections and soon becoming the most popular party, the National Socialists lost 2 million votes in the Reichstag elections in 1932. Seeking to capitalize on this weakness, the conservative establishment within the Republic thought the time was now ripe to pacify this violent party by welcoming some of its leaders into power. Surrounded by conservative ministers and only having a handful of allies in cabinet positions, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler was appointed Reich Chancellor by President Paul von Hindenburg in January 1933. The conservative establishment thought they could control him for their own ends, but they couldn't have been more wrong.
So they basically tried to draft him as like a token, like, hey, we got one of your people. Now we know that your party is going to destruct, and Nazism will be outlawed through Germany. But yeah, we know what happened.
Nice to say, Hitler and his movement could not be contained. The methods by which Hitler went from being essentially a lone chancellor surrounded by his opposition to having complete control of the government could warrant its own video. But soon enough, the Weimar Republic was no more, and the National Socialist Party was in full control. Using a new secret police force, the Nazis built a system of violent oppression and surveillance, attempting to silence dissent and unify the country towards one goal: war. With the outward display of public support, the Nazis first decided to tackle the unemployment problem. In reality, the next decade would merely see the expansion of the German military under the manipulative guise of repairing the economy. In some instances, instead of creating jobs, they simply distorted the numbers by encouraging young couples to get married through generous marriage loans, which removed women from the workforce. This reduced the pool of economically active people, thus creating the illusion of a falsely esteemed workforce. Other shady
Also, you know, speaking of like removing people from the workforce, like when a lot of countries, in order to like make their unemployment rates go down, they'll include like people who work like part-time jobs or people who have temporary seasonal jobs. Because I've seen that they'll include part-time jobs in unemployment in the employment rate. Like, bro, what? 9 times out of 10, people who work part-time jobs work more than one part-time job. So can you really consider them? They're not like fully employed if it's not full-time work. You know, I'm not saying they don't work hard. I'm just saying, like, you see, you try to make it seem like, hey, see, we're getting the unemployment down, even though we're including the part-time workers in our figures.
Tactics, including counting part-time workers as fully employed, or even classifying
Exactly. Like just what I said. You count them as fully employed. You count them as, hey, they work full-time, so that makes the number go down.
Forced laborers and prisoners as full-time employees. Additionally, in accordance with Nazi racial policy, many Jews were forced out of their jobs or had their businesses confiscated and redistributed to non-Jewish businessmen who displayed loyalty to the party. This falsifiable image of economic recovery opened up new opportunities for non-Jewish Germans, but at the same time caused enormous suffering and hardship for those deemed undesirable. This isn't to say that there weren't job creation programs. The Nazis invested hundreds of millions of marks into various schemes to get the Germans back to work, and millions of Germans were now able to find full-time jobs in Hitler's new arms factories. But other job creation programs were far less traditional. Co-opting an existing labor program called the Voluntary Labor Service, the Nazis forced the unemployed or people receiving welfare benefits to volunteer for hard labor like farming or clearing earth for the state's massive construction projects. Hundreds of thousands of Germans were forced to toil in abysmal conditions for lower pay than they were even receiving under the welfare program, and any who expressed complaints were sent to early forms of the concentration camps. And yet, to the Nazis, these suffering workers represented an encouraging statistic. By 1935, unemployment rates had plummeted to only 2 million people. But if you include the unemployment rate, the forced laborers, prisoners, and women taken out of the workforce by marriage loans, the actual unemployment rate stood at about double this figure. However rotten its foundation may have been, the German economy was growing. But it was not nearly enough to cover the amount the government was spending. Rather than temper their ambitions, the Nazis engaged in massive deficit spending to finance the programs they had in mind. German economists instituted a complicated new credit system called MIFO bills that allowed them to create and spend enormous amounts of cash while avoiding a new round of hyperinflation.
And you're telling me that these countries can't just print money? You're telling me that America can't just print money? Like, come on now. You people's like, oh, you can't print money. It has to get stamped. But it has to get an official seal from the U.S. Mint in order for it to be a real dollar. Bro, these countries is just printing money. They just printing money. So, bro, you can say that the United States is in thousands and thousands and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. What? No. We sign new bills every day. We dedicate $1 billion to such and such a cause. Just like how we randomly pulled out $180 billion for the stimulus checks during the pandemic, apparently, but we're trillions of dollars in debt. We found enough money to give everybody in the country $1,200, even though the country is supposedly trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. Please make that make sense. You know what I'm saying? Where did we pull that money from? You know what I'm saying?
These MIFO bills essentially acted like government bonds and allowed the Nazis to spend money that didn't really exist. This initially proved successful, but gradually collapsed over time. The German government was spending exorbitant amounts of money on rearmament and public works projects, with the mindset that it would all be repaid by the plunder and land seizure of future conquests. They instituted no long-term economic plan and made no attempts to boost foreign trade or look beyond the coming war. As the national debt skyrocketed, the Nazis didn't stop to consider what would happen if they lost the war they had been banking on. Instead, they invested everything they had into ensuring they would win. Every subsidy and every investment made went into manufacturing and engineering at the almost complete abandonment of consumer goods. All of the Nazis' programs and initiatives, from job creation to public works to even their racial policies, were ultimately meant to serve the cause of rearmament. Perhaps one of the most famous public works launched during this time, the Autobahn highway system, was no different. Financed in part by laws that granted 1 billion marks for infrastructure projects, the Autobahn was marketed as a massive modern highway system for the new German citizen to proudly tour his country behind the wheel of a shiny new car. Unsurprisingly, it also had another purpose. Hitler envisioned the highways of the Autobahn as the main arteries of a new military mobilization system. He pictured columns upon columns of panzers rolling down the roads, protected by a thick concrete shell that towered over the highways and blocked air attacks. Contrary to his lofty vision, no concrete tunnels were ever built, and the roads proved too unstable for heavy tanks to roll along.
Easy, but how much concrete would that take, though? Oh, but that's a lot of, wow, that's a lot of concrete. You know what I'm saying? And you know how hard you gotta make that concrete be able to withstand a missile from a plane or a bomb from a bomber? I mean, it'd be some pretty thick concrete.
Even the system under which the highways were laid out prevented them from having any use in military mobilization, since the roads were too far away from any front line. Despite creating over 100,000 jobs and improving infrastructure, the Autobahn's true success was propagandistic. Hitler personally planned some routes to weave through the most picturesque views in Germany, and insisted on the most modern bridge and road designs to project the image of a unified and idealistic state. But the government encountered a bump in the Autobahn. The average citizen couldn't afford a car, so who was going to use the new highway system in the first place? As a solution, Hitler imagined an affordable and cheaply produced vehicle known as the People's Car, or Volkswagen, that everyday citizens could purchase and drive through the new scenic highways through the beautiful German countryside. A mass advertising campaign and workers' payment program were launched to promote the car, and hundreds of thousands of laborers enthusiastically signed on. But as with so much during this period, everything ended up being used in service of the ultimate goal instead: rearmament. Despite 340,000 workers investing 110 million Reichsmarks into the car payment program, not one would actually receive a car. All of the funds collected by the People's Car campaign went straight towards war spending. Car ownership in Germany did noticeably increase during this period, but the Autobahn was not nearly the success portrayed by Nazi propaganda.
Bro. Yo, they just finessed the public out of bread for the tanks. Yeah. It's like, hey, yo, we gonna get you a car. Hey, yo, we got a brand new spanking car. It's affordable, so you can go around. Hey, I'm working hard. I just got paid my paycheck of $15 for the week. Hey, let me go put a payment plan on this new Volkswagen. Even the bad thing is, you're not gonna get the Volkswagen. That money just went into a Panzer.
Even by 1939, railways remained the most common form of transport in the country. These years of spending on military rearmament did not go unnoticed. As Germany was not yet ready for war, Hitler had to fabricate a variety of excuses to justify the expansion of the armed forces to foreign powers. To the surprise of many, Germany was suddenly very interested in producing thousands upon thousands of innocent passenger planes and agricultural tractors. These vehicles only existed on paper, however. There was nothing innocent nor agricultural about the Messerschmitts and Panzers rolling off the assembly lines, or the rifles and howitzers emerging under the table from civilian manufacturers across the country. This disguised military buildup culminated in 1935 when mandatory conscription was passed, and by the end of the year, the army had grown to nearly 800,000 men, over 8 times the maximum set by the Treaty of Versailles. With this act, the last of Germany's non-Jewish unemployed men were swept into military service, and unemployment was, on paper at least, fully eradicated.
Yo, first of all, man, I feel like a mandatory conscription is so unbelievable. I feel like that's a violation of human rights, because I feel like a person should be able to deny a person should be able to say, no, I don't want to go into the military. Like, you shouldn't, you know what I'm saying? You can't just be like, oh, you're 18. Hey, we're going to ship you off even though you really don't want to go. Like, that's, bro, I know, and they're going to lie to you. The propaganda is like, oh, you're doing a great service for your country. If you're doing a big disservice for your country, you're hurting your country, you're leaving your mom and your dad exposed to die if you don't serve. Even though that's not the case now, it kind of is the case because there's still selective service, and I still had to register when I turned 18. So if a war breaks out, guess who's going overseas? Not me. Not me. I'm not trying out, bro. I don't believe in that. But, you know, that's how it was, because like Germany, that's what Germany was on. That's what type of time they was on. They was like, yo, we gonna force this war. We gonna make it. We gonna pay back all the debt with the land that we about to steal from everybody. That's what they thought. I mean, all kudos for them for actually sticking to the plan and putting all their resources towards getting this plan to work.
The result of all of this was that Germany entered the Second World War far better off than it had been at the end of the last Great War. The gross national product had surged to well over 100 billion Reichsmarks in 1939 from a low of 60 billion in 1932. And to all, it seemed that Germany had fully regained its strength. But while unemployment was down and manufacturing and capital were up, many of those so-called employed Germans were slaving away in a labor camp, and that capital was contingent on the complete success of the war. Further, the benefits from all of this economic success were skewed heavily towards those considered true Germans, and came at the expense of everyone else. Like the Autobahn unable to carry Hitler's tanks, the Nazi economy was shiny on the surface, but hollow at its core.
If my man was wearing this, I would be all over him.
That smells really good.
Smells like my guy's cologne.
All right, so yeah, definitely, you know, obviously, propaganda, falsifying unemployment, falsifying employment records to foreign powers in order to get funding. You know, you're funding from these foreign powers, finessing the public into donating money to the war cause. That's how they got stronger. You know, and plus, obviously, a thirst for revenge from the Treaty of Versailles. You know, I would be kind of mad too if like my whole government got destroyed even after we've gone through an entire world war. So I definitely can understand why they would be angry. But you know, we all know what happened. You know. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Don't forget to turn on my post notifications if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also, don't forget to follow me on Daily Motion. Follow me on. Check out all the links in the description. Please be safe, stay on the grind. Have a great day. I'm out.